The Oscar nominations are out, and as always, there were some snubs, there were some surprises, and the world is an unjust place where Delroy Lindo is not recognized. Let's break it down. Hello, everybody, and welcome to my breakdown of the Academy Award nominations for 2021, recognizing films for the year 2020 and also part of 2021. Listen, this is a really weird Oscar year as far as eligibility windows and everything else. We're never going to see another year like it, including the ceremony itself, which it was announced this morning was going to be held at dual locations, at the Dolby Theater, where the Oscars usually are, and at Union Station in Los Angeles, reportedly to allow for social distancing of nominees, etc. So this is going to be a weird capper to a weird year in movies. There are a lot of the nominations that I'm very excited about. There's one that I'm not very excited about. I bet you can guess which one. But let's go down some of the major categories, compare it to some of my predictions, which came out last week. If you haven't seen my Oscar prediction video and you want to check that out, you can click the card and see a lot of my wrong predictions, some of them right as well, before we go over the actual nominees. And let's start with the Best Supporting Actress category, and Maria Bakalova is the one in my predictions that I got wrong, even though all indicators had kind of pointed toward the fact that she was going to get nominated. I thought that the comedy genre is so overlooked by the Academy so often that I just did not have faith. I predicted that Jodie Foster would get nominated instead of her, but the other four of my predictions were right. Maria Bakalova, Glenn Close for Hillbilly Elegy, Olivia Colman for The Father, Amanda Seyfried for Mank, and Yoo Jung-yoon for Minari, which ended up getting several Academy Award nominations. So I'm happy with this. I'm glad that Maria Bakalova did get nominated. She was one of my personal picks to be nominated in that category, and it's good to see that the Academy is rewarding comedy. And actually, Borat popped up in a lot of different places for nominations. It got a screenplay nomination, which was kind of surprising. Also kind of surprising the number of writers listed on Borat. Borat got more representation than I had expected at the Academy Awards this year. Let's look at the Best Supporting Actor category. Speaking of Sacha Baron Cohen, he was nominated as expected for The Trial of the Chicago 7. Daniel Kaluuya nominated, Leslie Odom Jr. nominated, Paul Raci for Sound of Metal all nominated as well. I was very happy to see that he did make the cut. The surprise here is Lakeith Stanfield. Lakeith Stanfield nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Judas and the Black Messiah. And the reason that it's a surprise is not that I didn't like his performance. I really, really did like his performance. As a matter of fact, if I'd known that you could put him in the Best Supporting Actor category, I would have put him there probably in my picks for nominations for this year. The weird thing is, when people ask about how the whole process works, Warner Brothers, when they do their campaigning, they can't select what category different actors are put in, but they can campaign for them in different categories. So Lakeith Stanfield was campaigned for in the Best Actor category, not the Best Supporting Actor category. And usually, whichever category the studio is campaigning for, that's where they end up. I think that may be why Delroy Lindo didn't get nominated today, is because he was put in the Best Actor category by Netflix, and the campaign was not for Best Supporting Actor, where I think he might have had a better chance. But Lakeith Stanfield, despite being campaigned as Best Actor for Judas and the Black Messiah, is nominated in the Best Supporting Actor category along with his co-star Daniel Kaluuya. So that was a big surprise for me, because I there have been a couple of other times where actors have been kind of borderline. Kate Winslet in The Reader is one that was pointed out to me by several people when I was posting about this on Twitter. But this is one of those very rare times where I can't think of another case, or it's very rare for a case like this to happen, where a studio puts an actor in one race, but the Academy decides to put them in a different race. So Lakeith Stanfield, a definite surprise in the Best Supporting Actor race, but not an unwelcome surprise. Looking at the Best Actor race, I actually went in my predictions for who was going to be nominated. I went 5 for 5. Riz Ahmed, Chadwick Boseman, Anthony Hopkins, Gary Oldman, and Steven Yeun all picked up nominations for Best Actor, but I'm not happy that I went 5 for 5, because that means that, as predicted, Delroy Lindo in Da 5 Bloods was criminally overlooked for a Best Actor nomination. And, I certainly was very passionate about this prior to the Academy Awards nominations being announced, but I didn't want to get fully angry just yet, because I was really holding out hope that maybe somebody somewhere had some sanity and would actually nominate him for this award. I'm not a bandwagoner here. I have been saying, and I will roll the clip, I have been saying that Delroy Lindo should be nominated for Best Actor since I reviewed *Da 5 Bloods* back in June. I cannot imagine a performance that I would put, or 5 performances that I would put above Delroy Lindo's performance in this film on my short list when it comes time for award season. Wherever they decide to submit it, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, I'm sure that there will be cases made for both. Delroy Lindo, something is wrong if he is not on those lists at the end of the year because he's that good in this movie. This is a complete oversight, and it's not just an oversight on the part of the Academy. There are many other organizations that have overlooked Delroy Lindo. I'm very happy to belong to a couple of critics organizations that did not overlook Delroy Lindo. In fact, the Hollywood Critics Association, in which I'm very lucky to be a voting member, gave Delroy Lindo the award for Best Actor. So the critics largely did remember that Delroy Lindo was phenomenal in a movie that happened to come out last summer. But the Academy and the Golden Globes and a lot of the other mainstream award shows apparently forgot. I will put Delroy Lindo's performance up against any other performance in that category and say not only did he deserve to be in that category, he deserved to win in that category. And the question is always, well, if you're going to put Delroy Lindo in, who would you take out? Gary Oldman. I would take Gary Oldman out. He's a great actor. Nothing wrong with his performance in Mank, but I think if you put those two performances together, I'm sorry, I have to go with Delroy Lindo. I would take Gary Oldman out of the race, but Mank, it is the overall leader in nominations. It got 10 nominations. It's a story about Hollywood. It's a story about old Hollywood. It's the kind of movie that's going to rack up nominations. Gary Oldman did get that nomination, but Delroy Lindo should have been nominated for Best Actor. It is criminal that he wasn't. It's more so than Toni Collette with Hereditary, and I know that that's saying something. For people that know me, and you know how much I loved Toni Collette in Hereditary, and I thought and still do think that she deserved an Oscar nomination for Best Actress. This, to me, is an even bigger oversight than Toni Collette in Hereditary, because I honestly never thought that stood a chance. It just was too much of a long shot. Delroy Lindo and *Da 5 Bloods. *Da 5 Bloods, first of all, generally was overlooked for almost everything. It got one nomination. It got one nomination for Best Score. It was punished for coming out in June. The Academy has a short memory, even and especially with the award season being as long as it was. I think that *Da 5 Bloods, if it had come out at the end of the year, I think you very possibly would have seen Delroy Lindo nominated. But the fact of the matter is that the Academy members, a lot of them have memories like goldfish. They remember the last 5 movies that they saw or the last 10 movies that they saw. And there are some great things nominated this year. But I think the one trend that we're continuing that still needs to be fixed is the idea that if you have a great performance, but it happens sometime before October, then it's oftentimes completely forgotten by the Academy. So this is my hill to die on this year. I may have a harder time getting over this than Delroy Lindo does, because it just hurts me to see such great work not be recognized. And I know that the Oscars and award shows aren't the only recognition for a great performance. There's also just the appreciation of people that watch and love the movie. But it would have been really nice to see Delroy Lindo, who, by the way, has been outstanding for decades as an actor, get this nomination, especially, again, over Gary Oldman, who I love Gary Oldman. He was underappreciated for a very long time himself. He got it. He got the award. He did the thing with the suit, and he did Winston Churchill, and it's great for Gary Oldman. Like, he's going to get another nomination, I'm sure. Like 3 or 4 years, he'll play another old dude, and he'll get a nomination. But I digress. I could do the whole video about Delroy Lindo, but I'm not going to. Let's move on and look at the Best Actress category, and I had 4 out of 5 of my predicted nominees, not my personal picks, but my predicted nominees were correct, but they did end up going with Andra Day instead of Amy Adams. There wasn't a whole lot of buzz around this performance until later on in the awards season, and she's really closing strong. And when you look at this Best Actress race, Viola Davis, Andra Day, Vanessa Kirby, Frances McDormand, and Carey Mulligan, the fact that Andra Day did pick up this nomination, and the fact that Frances McDormand has been, number 1, a frontrunner for so long for Nomadland. Number 2, she has won 2 Academy Awards for Best Actress already. I would say, I think that Carey Mulligan is a sneaky pick, but I'm going to pick Andra Day as my upset choice here. You never know, sometimes in these lead categories, you get an upset choice, and we have somebody who's closing the gap. as much as we're seeing here. I'm going to say that is my pick for the upset choice for Best Actress right now, because she did score the Oscar nomination for a movie, by the way, that has almost no buzz. It was not a particularly critical favorite. It's not one that has come out. She really has been carrying this movie's award hopes on her back to get that Oscar nomination. I think now you have to maybe put an upset alert, or at least an upset possibility, on the Best Actress race. Looking at Best Director, I got 4 out of 5 nominees right. David Fincher for Mank, Lee Isaac Chung for Minari, Chloe Zhao for Nomadland, Emerald Fennell for Promising Young Woman. Now, my outside pick for this race was Regina King for One Night in Miami. But it ended up being Thomas Vinterberg, who was the director of a Danish film called Another Round. Almost nobody had this predicted. I look at a lot of different sites that predict the Academy Awards and different. Gold Derby is one that does a lot of odds. Like Thomas Vinterberg, they put him at 100-1 odds. There were other names like Aaron Sorkin and Regina King for Florian Zeller for The Father. Even Spike Lee for The Five Bloods, they had above Vinterberg in the Best Director race. Another Round, like I mentioned, is a Danish film. It's nominated for Best International Film. Mads Mikkelsen, I had seen mentioned as an outside candidate perhaps for a Best Supporting Actor nomination, but for Thomas Vinterberg to pick up a Best Director nomination for that film is completely unexpected. Almost nobody had this in their top 5. I think it does install Another Round when you look at the Best International Film category as the clear frontrunner, because if you have enough support for Vinterberg to be nominated for Best Director, then you definitely have enough support for that film to win Best International Film. So if you're looking at your Oscar pools and you're looking at Best International Film, Another Round, I would say, is the clear frontrunner at this point. Let's look. When you look at the Best Picture nominees, I was kind of half right. I got the number of nominees right. I predicted that there would be 8 nominees. That we have not yet transitioned into the rule where there are always going to be 10 nominees. I think this was the last year where you have a variable number. So I got the number of nominees correct. The 8 nominated films for Best Picture are The Father, Judas and the Black Messiah, Mank, Minari, Nomadland, Promising Young Woman, Sound of Metal, and The Trial of the Chicago 7. I got 2 of the nominees wrong. I predicted that Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and One Night in Miami would be nominated. They were both not nominated for Best Picture, and I did not predict that Sound of Metal and The Father would make the cut, and they did. Both of those movies had stronger showings than I anticipated. I thought Sound of Metal would get a couple of the nominations that it did, and support for Riz Ahmed, support for Paul Raci, but that got way more support than I had anticipated. And The Father as well, which is a very small film, but a great one of my favorites of last year. I'm happy to see them both nominated. I am very surprised, maybe a little less surprised at Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, because I think that's always been a performance-driven movie in my mind, a little bit more than One Night in Miami. One Night in Miami being excluded in a lot of these categories, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later. That's the exclusion from the Best Picture race that I'm really surprised by. I guess I'm not particularly surprised at the inclusion of Sound of Metal and The Father. It's more of the exclusion of One Night in Miami, particularly, and also Ma Rainey. Let's look at some other miscellaneous things when we look at the other categories. First of all, this is one, sometimes I root for an underdog and it actually does get a nomination. Sound of Metal, the film, is in the sound category, which is now just one category. There's no more mixing and design and trying to figure out which is which, etc. There's just one category, Best Sound, and I'm so happy that Sound of Metal made it in, because much like Delroy Lindo, which did not get nominated, not only does Sound of Metal deserve to be nominated in this category, it deserves to win in this category, because the sound design and mixing and everything else in that movie are so crucial to the narrative of the film, and they're done so well. It immerses you as an audience member into the world of this film and what this character is going through. I think that Sound of Metal, perhaps more than any other film in this category, is a beneficiary of the fact that most of the major blockbuster films were pushed out of 2020. I think if things had gone on as usual, then you might see a Top Gun Maverick here. You may see a Marvel movie here. Some of the bigger films that ended up not coming out. I think that the fact that those films were pushed out made way for people to consider Sound of Metal in this category. I think, looking at the other nominees, that it very well might win, because what you might consider to be its biggest competition, which is Tenet, was not nominated for Best Sound, which, by the way, good. because it didn't deserve to be. I mean, listen, Tenet was a sonic blast, and I'm not talking about the delicious treat. I mean, it was like an audio, I don't even know what, but I would not actually name it as one of the best sound design movies of the year because it's unintelligible at times. It's a lot of sound, but I don't know if I would say it was the best sound. I think if it had been nominated in this category, it very well might have won. But with Tenet being gone and with a lot of the other big blockbusters out of the way, I hope and I'll be pulling for Sound of Metal to take that award home on Oscar night because it should win that award. Speaking of Tenet, just 2 nominations for Christopher Nolan's latest film: Best Visual Effects and Best Production Design. No cinematography nomination, no nomination for Best Sound, no nomination for Best Score. Of all of those, I think the score is the one that maybe surprises me the most, and cinematography, because I think those are both really good on the film. You do have to wonder, looking at the fact that Tenet picked up just 2 nominations, did the lack of theatrical screenings for the film hurt its chances? Is Christopher Nolan right? Is it a diminished experience when you're watching at home? You don't have this overwhelming theatrical experience. Perhaps that hurt Tenet's chances in some of these categories, and even the playing field for a lot of these other films that were also watched at home for the first time ever. Usually, Los Angeles at the Academy Awards season, I mean, there's 5 screenings every night, FYC screenings in theaters. This year, everybody watching the movies at home. When we look at the screenplay categories, I was surprised that Ma Rainey's Black Bottom didn't make it into the Best Adapted Screenplay race. Again, perhaps that should have been my first indication that the movie wouldn't have broader support for some of these larger categories, Best Picture, etc. And the Best Original Screenplay race, I was, this wasn't picked as everybody as a top 5 pick, but I was kind of surprised that Soul did not make that cut. Kemp Powers has had a great year, and the fact that Soul didn't make the original screenplay cut was kind of surprising to me. It seems like the kind of movie that the Academies, and a lot of times they do like to recognize animated features in the screenplay category. It seemed like the kind of movie that the Academy would recognize, but ended up not recognizing. When we look in the Best Score category, I mentioned it was kind of surprising that Tenet wasn't there. Terrence Blanchard is there, perhaps took that spot from Tenet. I've talked about Terrence Blanchard before. I think that he's a very underrated composer. The fact that this is the only Oscar nomination, 4 to 5 Bloods, at least somebody for the film is getting recognized. So it was kind of a surprise to see Terrence Blanchard in the Best Score race. But really, this is Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's race to lose. They have 2 nominated scores. The momentum, and I think that the reality is with Soul, I think they're going to win with Jon Batiste for their score for Soul because it's my favorite movie score of the year. They also just happen to do another great one for Mank. When we look at the Best Animated Feature category, a Shaun the Sheep movie, Farmageddon, is a bit of a surprise here for me, only because it seems to have edged out The Croods: A New Age, which has kind of become the box office story of the pandemic. I mean, this thing is still going. We'll be talking about the fact on Charts with Dan later today that The Croods has now been in the top 5 for 4 months. It's kind of ever present. It's one of the few successful theatrical movies of the pandemic era. Surprising a little bit to me that it got edged out, but I guess people just weren't feeling The Croods. The documentary feature category, it's really more about the exclusion of some very buzzy entries. There was one called Dick Johnson is Dead, which had swept through the festival circuit, had a lot of buzz. A lot of people just assumed that was going to be nominated. There's one called Boys State. There's one called All In, The Fight for Democracy, which heavily features Stacey Abrams, that people had thought would, right around election season particularly, might sweep to the win for the Academy Award. Another surprise, visual effects, you had the fact that Love and Monsters, which is something that's been a very high-viewed movie for people at home. A lot of people were choosing to watch it on premium video on demand, and now people renting it. It's now you can buy it, you can rent it, etc. But Love and Monsters picked up a nomination for Best Visual Effects over a lot of bigger films, the biggest one being Birds of Prey from last year. That's a bit surprising. There were actually no DC or Marvel comic book films nominated. It's the first time in several years. It's a rare occasion now that no big comic book films pick up nominations, but Love and Monsters is a surprise Oscar nominee for me there. There's another movie that was a surprise Oscar nominee for me, which is Pinocchio. This is not Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which he's been working on for a long time. There's apparently another version of Pinocchio. It is from Italy, and it came out. Makeup and hairstyling, which is a shortlisted category. Pinocchio made the cut. It beat out movies like Emma, One Night in Miami, Birds of Prey, Ray, which is, again, a little bit surprising, considering those are much bigger names. And then costume design, best costume design. This was not a shortlisted category, so really any movie was eligible, and it really came out of nowhere. It beat movies like News of the World and Personal History of David Copperfield and Enola Holmes, movies that you would think would be much more likely to grab the Academy's attention to be nominated in that category. It grabbed a costume design nomination. So Pinocchio is a surprise 2-time Oscar nominee, despite the fact that I haven't seen it, and I honestly don't know anybody who has. When you look overall at the number of nominations, Mank leads the field, probably not surprisingly, with 10 nominations. I don't think it's going to leave the night having won the most awards, if I'm being honest. I think that there are some other movies that stand a much better chance at tying or perhaps winning more awards than Mank does. Then we have tied with 6 nominations, The Father, Judas and the Black Messiah, Minari, Nomadland, Sound of Metal, and The Trial of the Chicago 7. And then following up with that, 5 nominations, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and Promising Young Woman. Netflix led all studios in Oscar nominations. It didn't lead in wins last year, but I think it's got a good chance at doing it this year because a lot of the big, buzzy premiere titles are from Netflix, and I think you're going to see more and more Netflix movies winning awards. They are really taking over. They're kind of doing to the Oscars and to the movie award shows what HBO did to the TV award shows starting back in the early 2000s when you saw cable now encroaching on the traditional broadcast networks. You now have streamers like Netflix encroaching on the traditional studios and taking over now with movies leading nominations. Talking about snubs, I mentioned One Night in Miami. I'm surprised it came out with just 3 nominations: Best Supporting Actor, Best Song, and Best Adapted Screenplay. That's another one for Kemp Powers. Some people thought he might be a 2-time nominee for Soul and for One Night in Miami. He ends up being nominated for One Night in Miami. Bit of a steep fall for One Night in Miami compared to what a lot of people had expected from it when it first opened. And then, as I mentioned, The Five Bloods. 1 nomination in the Best Score category. Nothing for Spike Lee. Nothing for any of the actors. Nothing for the movie itself. I do think that it was punished for coming out earlier than a lot of the other films, even though, what difference does it really make at this point? This was also a big year for Oscar firsts. When you look at the nominees, the face and the complexion of the Academy in their awards nominations really did change this year. This is the first year that 2 women were nominated for Best Director in the same year. This is also particularly remarkable because only 5 women had been nominated at all, ever, in the Best Director race prior to this year. So the fact that you have 2 women nominated the same year is a remarkable achievement for the Academy. Chloe Zhao becomes the first woman of color to be nominated in the Best Director race. Riz Ahmed becomes the first Muslim nominated in the Best Actor race. He's continuing on for Mahershala Ali, who broke ground in the Supporting Actor race for Muslim. Stephen Yeun becomes the first Asian American to be nominated for Best Actor. There have been Best Actor nominees of Asian descent before, but Stephen Yeun is the first Asian American. Viola Davis becomes the most nominated Black actress in Oscars history. She picked up her 4th Academy Award nomination. That is a record for a Black actress. She also picked up her 2nd nomination for Best Actress. She's the first Black actress to do that. Judas and the Black Messiah becomes the first movie with an all-Black producing team to be nominated for Best Picture. And then when you look at the acting nominees across all 4 major acting categories, 9 of the 20 acting nominees are non-white actors. That is a record for the Academy Awards. And I know how this conversation goes sometimes. I am plugged in online and I see how it goes, and I've seen the fact that the Academy has introduced some rules that did not take effect this year but are taking effect in future years. I think those rules have been misrepresented by a lot of people who are talking about them, and when they go into effect, perhaps I'll go a little bit more in depth with exactly what they are. But I do know that some people are going to look at the milestones that were set by the Academy today and ascribe them as demonstrative actions to say that they're disingenuous or that these are not deserving nominees. And I would say to those people, look at these movies. Watch these movies, and if you actually watch these films, you're going to be shown how wrong you are about this, because I love the fact that when I look at all these milestones that are set today, I think that it just shows what happens when organizationally and as an industry, the Academy and Hollywood decide to take a better look and do better at representing people, at telling stories across age lines, across gender lines, stories from every race, stories from every religion. That's what we see represented in these films here today, and they are legitimately some of the best films of the year. Discourse is what discourse is, and there are a lot of different corners to it around, and I'm sure that this is going to be something that's said by a lot of other people, that this is just the Academy trying to prove how woke they are, trying to prove how modern they are. That really does a disservice to the outstanding work done by every single one of these nominations. I can't think of a year where when I looked at the Best Picture race and said, I really think that every single one of these movies should be nominated for Best Picture. And again, I think this is not some performative thing on the part of the Academy. I think this is the results and the fruits of the labor that they've been doing to look out there and see what are the best stories, and are we really including everybody who has great stories to tell. 2020 had some great stories to tell from a lot of great storytellers, and no matter who wins these Academy Awards, I'm going to be happy with the winner because I honestly believe that every single person deserves to be nominated. Those are my thoughts on the Academy Awards. What did you think? Were there some favorites that were snubbed or some overlooked? What were your big surprises? Let me know down in the comments below. This is a busy day here in Dan Land. I'll be pivoting from doing this to getting ready for Charts with Dan. That will be up later this afternoon. We're going to look at the second weekend of Raya and the Last Dragon. There's been a change in the #1 highest grossing worldwide film of all time. We'll talk about that. A lot of box office stuff to get to, so stay tuned for that later today. Thank you so much for watching my rundown of the Academy Award nominations. I'll be back later today with box office news. Until then, stay safe and thanks for watching.